Hello, this is Joe Chamberlain. I'm the Executive Director of the Coastside Land Trust. We're in Half Moon Bay, California, and we're delighted to continue with number 3 of a 6-part webinar presented by Alvaro Jaramillo. Alvaro, as you know, is very famous and as a birder and an excellent presenter. So let's welcome Alvaro.
Well, thank you, Joe. Well, thanks for being here with us, everybody. It's been great to see that the numbers, have remained, and people, I haven't scared off too many of you with too many bird factoids and things. And just an apology last time for the technical issues, and hopefully that's all resolved now, but we will see how that goes. This talk today is about songbirds. I'll talk to you a bit about what we mean when we say songbirds, and also where some of the places are in the coastside here to go and look for songbirds. I'd also want to mention that the goats are back. The goats and sheep. There's some sheep in there. If you are a coastside resident and you haven't seen this phenomenon each year, goats are basically invited to come to areas where that need mowing, and we have this natural mowing that Coastside Land Trust organizes, and the goats are happy, everybody's happy. And one of the interesting things that's happened in one of the patches along Railroad Avenue in Half Moon Bay that the goats mow or eat is that the vegetation has changed a little bit, and this year we had a real nice population of red-winged blackbirds nesting in that area, and they weren't in the other areas that were not mowed by the goats. So it's kind of interesting, their effect, but it's kind of cool if you have kids and so forth to go and look at the goats, and eventually they move them. I don't know the schedule, but I'm sure that somebody does if you're really interested in seeing when they get moved from one place to the other. So songbirds, these are the little birds, and if you were to think about the names, what kind of birds are songbirds? There's the warblers and sparrows, vireos, if you've heard of them, grosbeaks. Further afield, the cardinal is a songbird, or orioles, etc. are songbirds. And you start getting the sense for the fact that they're smallish. In fact, the largest of the songbirds is the raven. So if you know the raven, that's as big as they get. Anything bigger, so herons, hawks, owls, or anything like a duck is not a songbird, okay? So then in this slide, you have sort of two birds that are moderate size, one little guy and one moderate sized one, the mourning dove and a bush tit. And then this is one songbird, the bush tit, and then one non-songbird, the dove. But I wanted to make a point here that, in fact, if you listen to bush tits, they sound, well, they don't make much of a song, actually. They really just have a bit of a trill that they give. And a songbird doesn't have to make a great song, but some of the best song makers in the world are in this group of songbirds. The dove, on the other hand, actually has a really pleasant voice. Mourning dove has sort of the cooing dove-like voice, and it is not a songbird. So it's not about whether you make or don't make a song, although I'll get to this next point here about specifics in the songbirds that is worth kind of thinking about here. Let's see, somebody's telling me here that there's some gray panels overlaying photos on the lower right. I'm not sure what that is. We'll try to figure out what's going on there. So with that, and I don't see anything on my side, so I just can't troubleshoot it from here, perhaps. But at least I don't think it's the camera. But we'll try to see what's going on there, and might be sort of where the video. See this. maybe that helps there. People can let me know. In any case, so there's the songbirds, and some songbirds have songs that they learn from their local other males and females, depending on which sex sings, and other birds that are hatched, they're born with a type of song that never varies, and it just is what it is. So the phoebe, the black phoebe over here, it does not learn a song, yet the Bewick's wren learns his songs. Most of the birds that learn songs have more elaborate songs, and the ones that don't, like the flycatchers, in fact, here in our region, tend to have really stereotype songs. They just sort of hatch with a specific song type, and that's it. Maybe they have a call and songs and this and that, but not much variation. Last time I talked to you about these white-crowned sparrows that have a dialect that's specific to Half Moon Bay. So for a dialect to actually form, you have to have the broken telephone effect of some birds learn a certain aspect and other birds learn a certain aspect, and have that difference in learning be regional. So any bird that has a dialect has to learn its songs. So you have to keep that in mind. And let's see here. Let's see if there's a, yeah, I'm sorry, getting more info on the panels, and I just don't know what to do on this side here what it might be. So I'm really apologize about that. I think it's something with, it's not the connection this time, it's something else, but let me see here if I can do that. Maybe hiding some other panels that are on my side. One of the places that we visit, as if we want to see sort of woodland birds and songbirds, that's perhaps the nicest and one of the best spots in the entire county to go watch birds, is Burley Murray Ranch State Park, which is just inland from Half Moon Bay. And also, Quarry Park, if you go to the places that aren't all eucalyptus, but in fact are places that have more of native habitats like alders and willows and so forth around the creeks down in the lower parts, those are really good spots too for woodland bird watching. And when you get into the woodlands, you also get into situations where you can see all sorts of other wildlife, from rabbits to gray fox like here, deer, bobcats. We have so much other wildlife, but as some of you know, if you've been out in the field a lot, mammals are hard to find. So that's why I love mammals. I love watching mammals, and one of the reasons I watch birds is because they're so much easier to see. So keep that in mind. Some of these goodies could show up when you're out in the woodlands. I want to also give you a reference, and we can put this up on the website later, for Sequoia Audubon Society's San Mateo County Birding Guide. So Sequoia Audubon Society is a partner, with the Land Trust, done things together in the past, and it's a great group that I would say, if you're interested in birds, go and sign up and belong to the group. Right now they're doing non-live meetings, but keep that in mind. San Mateo County Birding Guide has a map where you can click on each one of these spots, including many of them right around the Half Moon Bay area, and it'll tell you roughly what the place is like, how you get there, where you park, and what kind of birds you might see at what season. So it's one of the most helpful bits of information on where to go watch birds in the county. And most places in North America do not have something this detailed. We're really lucky here to have something at this level. And thanks to Sequoia for doing that for all of the county's birders. Here's one of the birds that you'll go and see out in the woodlands, and it's the California quail, the state bird. And I don't know if many of you are familiar with the call of the quail, but let's listen to it here a second. It's a funny sounding bird. And one of the aspects of its voice is that it's just so recognizable. And there are birds that are really easy to learn as far as voices, and birds that are not as easy to learn. And many of these songbirds, especially when we get into the warblers and so forth, they can be tough. So it's something that you just have to keep in mind. And let's see here. See if there's somebody's saying that maybe there's a panel open up top. Let's see if I can. Not sure if that would work there. Just trying to delete everything that's on my screen, essentially. But the California quail is one of the birds that you'll see, so you'll hear it, not a songbird, but it's out and about in the places we visit that have woodlands. Spotted towhee, we talked about California towhee last time, and the spotted towhee is another big sparrow. It's not a streaky bird, but a very, very brightly plumaged bird that often from the side, like this one on the left here, it might remind you of a robin because of its reddish breast. But if you're ever in you know, really want to know what it is, look for the eye. The spotted towhees have this orangey red eye, and they also have these white streaks on the wings that give the name spot. They're not really spot. We could have called it the streak towhee. And California towhee last time was a brownish dull bird. And the one thing it shares with the spotted towhee is that they're bigger than the average sparrows, and then they have very long tails. But in fact, the two types of towhees are not related to each other all that closely. So keep that in mind. Spotted towhee. Oh, and you see how this spotted towhee over here on the right, you don't see its feet. This is very specific. You know, if you look at a lot of spotted towhees, often you'll see that you don't see their feet. They tend to hide the belly and the feet in the shrubbery. Seems to be something they like to do. And speaking of shrub birds, so the spotted towhee is more of a shrub bird than the real foresty woodland birds. The wren-tit is another one that comes to mind. It's a very hard species to see. It sneaks around in the shrubbery, but every so often it'll poke its head out or just make an appearance or fly across the trail. It has a very long tail. It's like a ball of a bird. It's like a round ball with a big head and these yellow eyes, really sort of vivid yellow eyes. It looks like an oversized bush tit, but they only come in pair, usually one or two, not like a bush tit flock that tends to be 10 plus. And they have a distinctive song you hear all the time up in the hills. You can hear that. So to help you sort of listen to that, there were two birds singing, and the classic description of the wren-tit song is a bouncing ball. So you know how a ball each time bounces lower and lower. So it goes tick 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 tick. But then you'll hear in the background towards the end, there's also another bird that just does a tit 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 without slowing the sound. And the reason I'm talking about this difference in sound is this is one of the few birds in the area where the male has a song and the female has a song, and they actually are different. So the one that speeds, that is the bouncing ball, is the male. The one that doesn't change in tempo is the female. And they sing together. They almost always, when the female sings, she will respond to a male song, and she comes in a little later. So the male starts, and then the female goes. It's a duet of a song, and duets are specific usually to birds that don't migrate, that have long-term residency where the pair has to really maintain a close pair bond, and they often are species that share nesting duties and so forth. And they tend to be, if you actually took the number of birds that make these duets, most of them are in the tropics where there are no migrant birds, or very few migrant birds that, you know, nest there and leave. But here we have the wren-tit, and also another bird that does a duet is the California towhee. And I was talking about him last time as being kind of a good father, in that, you know, he hangs around and he's pairs off with female for many years. And that that is again sort of a correlates this duetting and their nesting and migration habits. So wren-tit, keep that in mind. And then another bird that is hard to see but easier to hear. So wren-tit, once you learn the song, you'll hear them all over the place, and you will see one for every 10 or more that you hear is the Pacific wren. Now, the Pacific wren, let's say you're in Quarry Park, or if you're somewhere else, Burley Murray, they tend to be in the moistest spots there are. Really dark, moist, you know, where if you could poke the ground, it would be muddy. That's where the Pacific wren is. And it's the one on the left, the Buick's wren, just to give you a similar, a relative who actually doesn't look that similar, because the Pacific wren has this little tiny tail and is very dark. But you can see the wren-like bill shape and the fact that both of them will hold their tail up with the classic wren look. But listen to the Pacific wren, because it's a tiny, tiny bird with a huge voice. I find it's really difficult to describe the song of a Pacific wren because it's so complicated. It's just so much is going on, and it just sort of goes on and really sort of tinkles through. And that's maybe the best way to identify it, is just a happy sounding, fast, quick jumble of notes that that you hear from a very wet spot. That'd be Pacific wren when you're out looking for some of these songbirds. And a bird that actually has the word song in its name is a song sparrow, and it is common all over the coastside. And in fact, it's common all over North America. It's one of the most widespread songbirds in North America, and it tends to take edge habitat, so not forest, but shrubby edge, not grassland. It likes sort of the shrub or sort of mid-story along an edge area. And there's stripy, as a lot of our song sparrows are, our sparrows are. And one of the things to look is this stripe that kind of comes down from the beak, and it really broadens almost into a dark triangle on the, to the sides of the breast. That is a good feature for the song sparrow. And the fact that there's sort of gray and brown and rust mixed in, and it's a moderately long-tailed bird. And to see if this works, but here's a local song sparrow. And when you see as a songbird like the song sparrow singing, you get the sense that the entire body goes into making that sound, and the beak moves, or and opens and closes, but there's a lot of head movement, and it's actually quite a difficult feat for a small bird to make such a big sound, but they're adept at it. They're sort of, that's what they do. And one of the most amazing things that many songbirds do is that they have like a voice box like we do, but it's called a syrinx rather than a larynx. And these birds in the songbirds that tend to learn their songs, so the warblers and the thrushes and the wrens and the sparrows and all these things, they can actually make two different noises at the same time when they're talking or singing. So just imagine this, that if you could be speaking in English and in French at the same time, and that perhaps you could have, if we were a different kind of creature, somebody listening to you, a talk that you're giving in English and in French, and the French speakers would be able to hear that part, and the English speakers would be able to hear that part. That's what goes on in the songbird world. It's pretty amazing to be able to make two different sounds at the same time. And I wanted to show you this, like song sparrows, because they're all over North America. Depending on where you are, there's a basic song sparrow shape, and that little triangle of dark that comes down, from the beak, and the stripiness. But some of them are darker, some of them are paler, and it varies depending on where you are. So that dark one there is from Seattle, and then this paler one is from Montana, just so you know. And you already heard the song sparrow song. Whoops. And I'll just put a bird that's from more open country, and we'll talk about them in a couple of, and maybe next time or the day after, or the time after, the Savannah sparrow. But people confuse these song sparrows for Savannah sparrows. And just keep in mind the Savannah sparrows are much whiter underneath. The under color is really crisp and white, and they have this yellow between the bill and the eye, and they're pinker legged and shorter tailed. So even though you can sort of, if you're starting, you'll be thinking, oh no, this thing's this stripy thing. And sometimes you have to ignore the stripy bits and just look at other aspects of it. To me, the really sort of short-tailed and big, long pink legs helps me identify Savannah sparrow compared to a song sparrow. In the woods, you have flocks of birds sometimes. You will have a group of different species that all come together. And keep this in mind, especially in fall and winter, the chickadees and the bush tits tend to be the leaders of the flocks. Little shorter, shrubbier habitats, it's the bush tits. The little taller habitats, the chickadees, but sometimes they'll mix in. And you can find other species by looking for chickadees and bush tits as you go in your birding. And somebody, I just got a note here that, what is the difference between a call and a song? In the most basic sense, the song is the more complicated, warbled or longer, territorial or mate attraction vocalization than a bird gives. But the chippy notes or the quick little things that they give here and there to each other or as they fly over, those are calls. Calls often are single syllable or simpler, and songs tend to be longer and have different purposes. But there's more complexity to it than that. Let's say that. In these flocks, you'll find a bird that is greenish and nondescript, except that it has this big eye with this pale ring around the eye, and it's called Hutton's vireo. Hutton's vireo, and there's a very similar in winter here. We have a similar species called the ruby crown kinglet. I won't get too far into that right now because I'm sort of focusing on the birds that are around right now. Hutton's vireo is a year-round resident. And one of the things to look for is if you get a look at their legs, they have this blue-gray color. The kinglet always has a black leg with a yellow foot. So keep that in mind. There are other features to look for. The vireo is a little huskier and a little bigger, slower moving. The kinglet moves more quickly. Listen to its song though. Yeah. Oh, it sort of goes on and on. It's whoops, ready to go again. Hutton's vireo has this monotonous song of just single notes or maybe a two-syllable note that it just repeats over and over and over again. Then it'll switch to a different type and it sings that for a while, but it's repetitive and there's a space between the song, each bout, and it keeps on going. And what I wanted to point out about Hutton's vireo is that it's one of the few species around here that we consider a continuous singer. It will sing nonstop, just change the note types and keep on going. Most other birds are bout singers, so they do their little da-da-da-da, they're done, then they make their song again, and they're done. And then they might switch to a different type of song, maybe, depending on the species. But Hutton's vireos and vireos in general just, you know, go on and on and on and on. So they're continuous singers, and that's actually sometimes a good way to separate them. In these flocks and in the breeding areas in the woodlands, you'll have warblers. We have Wilson's warblers and orange crown warblers and various other warblers. The Wilson's warbler is a yellow one that the male has a really distinct black cap, like a yarmulke, and they have a really specific look to them. To me, they have a big head and a big eye. They don't have much around the eye, and that with the little hat and so forth, it just gives me this little jovial, friendly look. They always look kind of happy, and it's the calm aspect of the face, because there's not much going on in the face and the eye really stands out. The females will have less dark on the top of the head, but if you know the male, you will recognize a female just from the general face coloration. So Wilson's warbler is a very common breeder here in the woodlands, and it leaves in winter. So this is one of the birds you'll see now, but you won't see later. Let's see if we can hear his song. So if you're in the willows, in the alders, and you hear this song, that's kind of explosive. It's short, but it sounds to me almost like a sewing machine. It just goes, and then you take your foot off the little, little sewing accelerator, and then, and that's it. And it just does that over and over again with some variation. Sometimes it's a little bit more complex, but if you think of that repetitive sewing machine nature to it, it's one of the ways to remember it. The orange crown warbler, see, it's another yellow kind of bird, and warblers have thin bills, but look at how the Wilson's warbler's bill's kind of fatter. Orange crown warbler truly has a little tiny pin, very finely tipped bill. They are yellower if they're males in breeding season. They're a little greener or in the fall and winter, depending on if there are other populations that come in or if they're young ones and so forth, but they vary is one of the things. But they will look generally yellowish to greenish gray. But look at the face. There's a lot of dark going on around the eye. So if that, if you think of that look of the Wilson's warbler just sort of looking friendly and peaceful, the orange crown warbler looks more serious, and it's just because of that dark going through the eye. And this is sort of, I've found that looking at faces of birds and just what impression they give you can be much more important than anything about the wing bars and the tail and this or that. You just look at the face and it's like a yellowish bird. It looks real serious because of that dark through the eye, and then it also has a little yellow above or below the eye. Orange crown warbler, that's all you need to do. And don't look for the orange crown. Oh, even though this male on the right shows it, most of the time it's hidden. You won't see it. So it's a name that's not that useful in the field. When you have a song, that is, you can't count the notes, we call it a trill. It's, it's just delivered too quickly. Orange crown is a two-parted trill. So it's a trill that goes and then it slows or droops at the end. And that's the way you identify it. There are other trilling birds, but often they just stay on the same trill and stop, or some are slower trills, some are faster trills. There's various other species that trill. But orange crown warbler in our woods in the summer, and it's this droopy trill, then you've heard an orange crown warbler. The common yellowthroat is found all over in the Half Moon Bay area, moister sites. It doesn't have to be in marshes. Like they're found in marshes in eastern North America. Here they're in shrubby areas, moist areas, edge of vernal pools or just old field habitats. And the male's the easier one to identify. The common yellowthroat has his mask. It looks almost like a robber's mask. If you see that, and yellow on underparts, that's a common yellowthroat. I'll point out that in the Bay Area, we have a special kind of common yellowthroat that's only found in the Bay Area. It's called the San Francisco common yellowthroat, and it's a subspecies, so not a full species, but it's actually quite different in its size. It's smaller than any other yellowthroat in North America and more olive looking, if you're into all those details. And there are, other warblers, and in winter we have migrants that come through. There's rare warblers that show up in the fall. So I could go on and on and on with warblers, but what I'll just have you think about right now is that the ones that are common in the woods are orange crowned and Wilson's. There's also common yellowthroats, scattered through here and there. And then this one with the dark hood, that's very hard to see. It's in Burley Murray Ranch. You can hear it more than see it. It's called the McGilvery's warbler. So you might want to listen to the voice of that if you're trying to look for it, but it's very tough to see. It's one of sort of the most sought out warblers that nests in the area because it's tough to see. And the yellow warbler, that's this male here with this yellow color and stripy reddish bits underneath, with also a face that doesn't have anything going on. So it's not the dark stripe of the orange crown warbler. I just wanted to put in yellow warbler because it's one that always sort of rattles around in my brain as a question that I've never been able to figure out. And that is that the yellow warbler used to be a breeder in Half Moon Bay. If you go to Safeway in Half Moon Bay, there's that creek behind there. They actually used to breed there, and I'm talking, you know, maybe 8 years ago. And a couple of pairs were in there, and from the bridge on Main Street, you could hear yellow warblers there, and they disappeared. They've just gone. They're not here other than as migrants. They don't breed here anymore. Yet those places look pretty much the same as they used to. I don't see any huge difference in the habitat. And I just don't know what's happening, why the yellow warbler disappeared. And those things are always the most troubling, you know, and I'll just leave that there for you to ponder, and maybe somebody else is pondering it elsewhere in the state to determine why this warbler would become rarer as opposed to the other ones. And one of the reasons why it's odd is that it is one of the most widespread warblers in all of North America. In many places in North America, it is the most common warbler. Why would we lose a bird that seems to do so well elsewhere? So it's something to think about. And when thinking about our birds and, you know, our loss of the yellow warbler or what have you, I want to mention that a lot of these birds are migratory. So what we share them with other people, we share them with other habitats, we share them with other geographic areas. A lot of our Wilson's warblers, for example, are heading down to Mexico or Guatemala. These are pictures of people and places in Guatemala. And keep that in mind, birds are a real connection between environments, people, and geography, as well as history. Why, you know, the historical reason why these birds migrate, and some are resident. So they can be a great way to understand what's going on in the rest of the world by paying attention to our birds, which we share with other people and other places. And one of the ones that is also migratory, and to me, if I'm going to go into a woodland in summer on the coast side, is the most sort of the song that I think of when I think of this time of year in Half Moon Bay. It's a Swainson's thrush. Let's see if you've ever heard this, people. Swainson's thrushes, their song has a flute-like quality to them. It's complex. They sound like they're spiraling sort of upwards, you know. And the one I played you was from Eastern North America. It's very similar to the one from here. But Swainson's thrushes become really abundant in the spring, late spring, and into summer. Right now, if you go to Burley Murray or any spot with willows or alders, there'll be Swainson's thrushes, and they're singing. In the evening or mornings, the best time to hear them. And they're kind of magical sounding. They're related distantly, but related to the nightingale from Europe. That's, I don't know how many poets have talked about the song of the nightingale. And go and listen to them, because they're, as a visual, the bird's really not all that amazing. So it's a spotty bird from below, but, uniform and warm brown above with a little bit of a eye ring. Looks like it's wearing glasses. That's Swainson's thrush. Now, here's something interesting about, or at least if somebody found it interesting when I talked last time about the division of populations, thinking about swallows and other migratory birds, and that they may arise originally from what went on in glaciation. In Swainson's thrushes, we have genetically a Western group and an Eastern group. And the Eastern group is a little bit more olive colored, and the ones that we have here in the West are a little bit more russet or rusty backed colored. And the ones in the East tend to migrate to South America. The ones in the West tend to migrate to Central America and Mexico. And this is what they call a migratory divide, and where you have sort of a line somewhere in North America where east of that line, they all go one way and they look one way and genetically are something. And west of that line, they're slightly different genetically, look a little different, and migrate to different places. And it's basically speciation happening in front of our eyes. These will be two different species. Maybe some people even think they're two different ones right now. But look at this little triangle here. I mean, sort of a square here in California, where we have our population that heads down to Mexico. And then in the Sierra, they head down to Central America and some of them into Mexico. But then down towards Lake Tahoe, you get birds that are from the entirely different eastern population. I mean, they're almost side by side with each other. And these go down to South America. And this is being studied now. This is a brand new publication this year. And they're just almost right next to each other. And that deems study and understanding how this whole thing works. But this is really the history of how our continent was shaped geologically being seen in the birds. As far as songs, one of the most amazing ones that we don't have them all that commonly here in the coast is the northern mockingbird. They're in places in the coast where there's a lot of berries, and especially in winter, but we don't really get them breeding that much around Half Moon Bay. The mockingbird will imitate songs. It'll create its own song by copying voices of other birds, which is pretty fantastic. But we also have some of our finchy birds that we've talked about before that actually will do this. Lesser goldfinch, the yellow one here, and purple finch will mimic. They're not, the goldfinch is pretty good at it, but their songs are so quickly delivered, it's hard to pick out the mimic bits. But once you get more interested in birdsong and you start recognizing songs, especially things like jays that are really easy to recognize, you will find them. You know, purple finches will actually do jay vocalizations within their little song. I mentioned that flycatchers are birds that don't learn their songs and they have very specific stereotype voices. There also can be really similar. And I'm not going to talk too much about how to tell apart flycatchers, but here are three that you can see in our local woodlots. You know, the western wood pewee, in the middle is the olive-sided flycatcher, and then the Pacific slope flycatcher. They're all migratory. They're only here in summer. And let me play you especially the olive-sided flycatcher in middle, because it's an easy one. The song, you'll remember this, it says, quick 3 beers, quick 3 beers. You're thirsty, quick 3 beers. And you hear that from the top of the trees. They always perch right up at the top. And it's one of the easiest birds to sort of, once if you learn that quick 3 beers, you won't forget. And in a way, it's much easier to identify these difficult birds from their song than some of the differences in plumages, because they're so dull in their overall plumage. Oops. Sorry, I got a bunch of them. This is a picture of my friend Bill Thompson, who passed away last year. Unfortunately, he was the editor of Birdwatchers Digest, and he's just having fun here with a bunch of you know, birders. Probably went to a convention, some birding convention, and so forth. And the point I want to make here is that I showed you flycatchers. I had you listen to all of these warbler songs, and I think for some people, especially if you're starting out with this, it's starting to get a little too much. Like there's just too much going on, and it might become stressful to learn. You just got to keep it fun. You just move at the level at which things are fun for you, and then that's how you will learn more quickly. The moment you feel like this is stressful or this is too much, or I can't see that I'm not, slow down a bit, just go back to the fun part, because your learning just stops when you get stressed out. And especially if you can find a gang of people, friends who are interested in this, who have your same style of learning or the way they enjoy nature, go ahead and do that, because that's again how you're going to learn quickest. And now I'm going to show you just a few more birds that are a little bit more distinctive looking, except in this case, the woodpeckers, downy and hairy, are really similar to each other. They're very distinctive. You see a woodpecker And in these two, one of them is a female. So Downy over here is a female, so she doesn't have the red, and this hairy is got red, so it's a male, but both can have red. So don't look at the red, but look at the face. The Downy is kind of a cuter looking bird with just a shorter beak, much more serious beak on a hairy woodpecker. And if you want to look at one feature that can be real helpful, if you can see it, see these white feathers on the outside of the tail? If they're speckled, spotted dark like this, that's a downy feature. If they're completely white, then that's a hairy feature. But easier is often just to look at the head. Is it a cute little guy with a short beak, or is it a more serious looking guy with a long beak? Then it's a hairy woodpecker. And what's weird is these two birds look so much alike, but genetically they're not as similar to each other as you'd think. They're not each other's closest relatives. And there are some scientists that think that these birds are evolving to look alike because of some kind of mimicry that's going on, which is beyond what I'm going to talk about here, but it's just an interesting thought to think about. One of the coolest birds in the area, though, is the northern flicker. It's a kind of woodpecker, and it's not that rare in the woodlots around here. It just has all sorts of neat looks to it, like those spots underneath, the color underneath, that dark shield on the breast, the red on the tail, on the wings. For a lot of people, when they see a northern flick, or if they have ever gone to a field trip like the ones, you know, that we do sometimes, Land Trust or Sequoia, and you can see a flicker in a telescope up close, you cannot believe that something so crazy looking actually lives around here. The black-headed grosbeak is a migratory bird that's common right now too in our area, and I like it. It's just a funny looking. I love those white spots all over its wings. You know, it's like every little feather on its wing has to have a spot on it, and it even has spots on the feathers that cover the top of the tail, the upper tail coverts, with these just spangled looking critter that can be hard to see sometimes, but easy to hear. They sound like an American robin, and just look for that in the woods right now. And I always think of them as like sort of, they could be, you know, the official bird of Half Moon Bay because they have that pumpkin color to them. So keep that in mind if you're looking for birds and you see something that looks like a little pumpkin colored thing up in the trees. That's black-headed grosbeak. The other one that's not in the woods, but in the area, and especially when you're driving through up to get to Burley Murray, is the western bluebird. And we probably have more of them in the winter than in summer, but they're all around in sort of agricultural areas. And it's also one of our beautiful birds. Songbirds often are some of the most gorgeous birds in many places you go to in the world. So western bluebird is one of the ones that really sort of stands out, along with the grosbeak and so forth, around where we live. And so next time, so that was songbirds. I didn't show you every songbird. There's other species that come in winter. I just wanted to, you know, sort of think about what you might be seeing today for this week if you went out. And, you know, I didn't want to confuse you too much, because as you can see, the species start getting to be a lot, and it does overwhelm at times. But hopefully, if you're either new at this or have been at it for a while, you gain some new information there. Sorry about the funny stuff that was going on. Hopefully that got resolved over time here. And next time we'll be doing beach and ocean. So we'll be talking about some of the birds you see right on the coastline, and then some of the ones that are further out in the ocean, with a bit of the fields and so forth, that we can, you know, maybe more info on savanna sparrows and other things that you can see close to the coast. Then the next time after that will be, it'll be about the harbor. So you hopefully can catch these next ones that are happening. And wanted to show you that there are other warblers out there like this Townsend's, and they come in winter. So there's a lot more to see once you get into this whole songbird stuff. And yeah, wanted to say that, you know, we also are doing the boat trips. I actually went out on a boat yesterday and sort of field tested how it works in terms of COVID, and it's actually felt quite like a good system where we all had our masks on, very few of us on the boat, and we're gonna be heading out to the Farallones for multiple days next month and in August. And also, if anybody is interested in some of the other trips we do, go to alvarosadventures.com. Let's see, questions. Let me start here. Oh, there was a question about, okay, song and calls. And we talked about the quail, California quail. Why do they have scale patterns on their bellies? And is that the same in other quails? You know, that's a really good question. I mean, the why of patterns and colors is a really good question. So this little bird here that looks really almost like a fruit more than a bird, it's got so many colors, is a Cuban toady from Cuba. You can only see that in Cuba. And why does it have the blue and the red and so forth? There are some scientists that think basically just it's a random set of things that look pretty, and then the mate just says, well, I like that bird, I'm going to mate with him because he has a pretty pattern, and there's this correlation between what one sex likes and what the other one looks like. And in some cases, like the toady, both of them actually are bright, males and females. In other cases, the male's the bright one, the female isn't. And in quails, these patterns of scaliness or circles or other aspects, some other scientists think that they're actually hard to create because feathers grow out sort of outwards and sort of open up. And to make feathers that are perfectly scaled takes a certain amount of, your growth rate has to be sort of good or steady or what have you to make these scale patterns perfect. So these scientists think that some of these color patterns aren't just pretty, they're giving you information. So if your scales were wiggly, maybe it means you didn't feed very well. So there's still a lot of communication in the scientific community about what is what and which is the right answer there. I'll just give you those two sort of ways to look at it though. Wren-tits, do they sing year round to maintain territory? Yes, exactly. Because they're around all year, and the pairs hang out together for multiple years, and they duet. They actually will sing throughout the year. They're one of the few birds that you will hear singing any time of year around here. And I talked about the Pacific wren, and then the question is, when did it get split off? And what this is sometimes scientists decide that a species actually is two, like these Swainson's thrushes that I was talking to you about. Let's say there's more research and everybody decides, okay, and there's reasons and criteria that people follow for separating species. When you decide there's two, we call that a split of the species. And the Pacific wren used to be called the winter wren here. And now it was separated. The western ones become the Pacific wren, and the one in the rest of North America, in the north and in the east, is called the winter wren. And it was separated, I want to say, within 10 years, so maybe 8 years ago or so. So it's actually a relatively new name. So if you have an older book, you might have an older name for it, but don't let that confuse you. And you can always search online for the brand new names of everything if you don't want to buy a new book or a new app. Do bush tits have communal nesting areas, even though they build individual nests? I don't think so. I think they actually sort of separate out. I've never seen multiple nests in one tree that are being used. I have seen multiple nests in one tree from the same pair, or probably from, I assume it's the same pair from previous years, because the nest will last a long time. They look like an old sock hanging. So a pair will use that tree, they like it, they will use it the next time, and they will build a separate nest next to or near the other one. Sometimes they'll actually steal material from the old nest to make the new nest. So if you see multiple nests, it might be that it's from the previous years. Yeah, somebody asked, what makes a vireo a vireo? That's a good question. This is where you know, I am so excited to be living sort of as a bird person today because we're getting so much new information from genetics and other new techniques and just computer power to figure out things that we could never have figured out. So when I was a kid and I started birding, the vireos are sort of considered closely related or closer to warblers, our warblers. And now we know that vireos are in fact more closely related to crows and ravens, even though they don't look anything like them. And not only that, vireos and ravens and crows are part of this huge kind of bloom of species that happened from originally an Australian group of birds. And while our warblers, our sparrows, are a New World, sort of an American group of birds that have sort of proliferated here. So the warblers and the vireos are in fact two little birds that maybe look somewhat alike in some cases that have come in from two different areas, two different histories completely. But vireos, compared to warblers, let's say, they tend to move slowly. They have these thicker bills and sometimes almost a hook on them at the tip, while the warblers have a pointier bill. And they have continuous songs rather than these more elaborate, song bouts of our regular warblers. And they're maybe that's what I can tell you about them right now with the vireos. And let's see, what makes let's see, yellow warblers. Seen yellow warblers in other parts of Half Moon Bay area, in the willows along the creek. That would be interesting to see if they're nesting or not. I know that there's good evidence that they might still be nesting down in Pescadero Creek in south end of the county, and it would be great to confirm if they're in other places in the Half Moon Bay area nesting, because we do have them as migrants. So it's a little different, the nesting situation. And again, why we lost them, I just don't know. Let me see here. Oh, see, have European sparrows moved in? Yeah, house sparrows, they are in the Half Moon Bay area. And the question did they move in where the yellow warblers were? Well, they have a different habitat, completely different habitat, and they don't, there's no chance really that sparrows might have caused an issue with the warblers. And again, we have to think in the east, where yellow warblers in the Midwest and so forth are really, really common. So are house sparrows. So I don't think that's it. I really, this is still a mystery, and I'm glad you all think it's a mystery. Maybe sort of collaboratively we'll figure out what happened. Maybe the vegetation isn't, maybe it looks the same to me, but the vegetation isn't the same. And, we are drying out. We have to think about the fact that Half Moon Bay is not nearly as moist as it used to be, and not just from winter rainfalls, but fog. We don't have the fog levels we used to have, and perhaps that has changed the structure of the trees in the creeks or something, and they're the they're the yellow warbler in the coal mine telling us something's going on. I don't know. Some spotted toadies have white breasts and others have red breasts. It's kind of interesting. There's where the red on the breast is on a spotted towhee is really well placed, so that if you see them from the front, they actually look like they have a dark head and a white breast. And if you see them from the side, all the white is covered, so they look like they have a fully red breast. But you're actually seeing the flanks, so it's depending on the angle. So watch that white-breasted towhee, wait for it to turn sideways, and you'll see that it has the red there. In fact, the old name for this bird, because it was one of these that was split way back, was rufous-sided towhee. Homeless encampment in Safeway, could that have to do with the yellow warblers leaving? I've got to admit, I've wondered about that, but they were also further up the creek in areas that I don't think have the same issue. I don't know. I don't know. All the other warblers are still there, so you can go to those areas and They're singing Swain's Thrushes by Safeway, and Wilson's Warblers are singing in there. So they're all still there. Why not the yellow warblers? So I don't know. So somebody asked about birds that sing while flying, like lesser goldfinches. Is this part of territorial behavior? Some species of songbirds will have a song flight, and lesser goldfinches are one of them. And it's given in different contexts. So you can sing on the ground, and then you can sing while in the air, and it means something a little different. So you know. And let's see here. I'm going to see if I can show my video panel here. Okay. Yeah, it's funny because I had to close off all those panels. I'm not seeing things as I usually do, so I'm little confused. Kate, are you there?
I'm here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this time I can't see you. I'm not sure why.
Sorry.
I think I did something wrong, guys. Sorry about that, but hopefully it worked out and you could see most of the pictures and hear most of the stuff.
Hi, well, thank you so much. And thank you for a fantastic presentation. Again, we're grateful to have you here. Thank you all for being here today to watch Alvaro. He's an incredible wealth of knowledge, and we're all lucky to be here. If you haven't, I think you can see the link that we put in the chat, but just to remember to check out Alvaro's adventures. He's got a trip coming up, actually, or a couple of trips coming up, so check those out. If you didn't get a chance to listen to all of this, you were doing a couple things and you didn't get to every little bit of this, or if you'd like to pass this on to someone else, we will have this up on our website within probably, I'll give it till tomorrow, and then check on our website because we'll have a video link for you to share or to watch yourself. Personally, I like watching it again. When you're folding laundry, it's a nice chance to just really get to catch things that you didn't catch the first time. And then also we will be sending you a follow-up email. So those should be coming to you by in the next couple days. So take a look at that. Yeah, check out our website at coastguidelandtrust.org for any of this stuff. And also just to keep updated on all the stuff that's going on with the Coastside Land Trust. Thank you to many of you who've already made donations. We're grateful for those, and you know that it is through the generosity of those types of donations that we're able to do, the Coastside Land Trust is able to do this incredibly important preservation and protection and enhancement of our open spaces, and to fund the junior land steward programs, and also these webinar series and things like this. So all of this is made by donations and grants. So we are grateful to so many of you who have already donated. Just an update on Alvaro will be that final, so all of these are on at Saturday at 10, but our final webinar, we have updated it and changed it to July 19th, which is the Sunday at 11:30, because Alvaro is actually going to be going out on his first trip on that day, on Saturday. So if you had already signed up for it, you don't need to change anything. The link is the same, so you can you should have received an email saying that the time has changed, but either email will work. You can just click into it, and also you can, if you haven't signed up, sign up for it. I'd be happy to have you there. Thanks again for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week, next Saturday, when Alvaro will be talking about beach and ocean birds. Thanks again, Alvaro.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.